Hello and welcome to the Moviedio channel. Earl, the owner of the shop, offers her the keys and tells her how to get there. Jennifer's trip is intended to provide her with some tranquility while she works on her novel. Jennifer becomes disoriented on the way there and pulls over to a gas station for assistance. She encounters Johnny, one of the attendants, who directs her in the right route. Johnny tries to make a move on Jennifer, but she shocks him by activating her panic button by accident. Andy and Stanley, his mates, laugh at him after he spills a pail of fluid. Johnny's shame is palpable as Jennifer drives away. Jennifer arrives at the cabin, which will be her home for the next several months, after a lengthy journey. She unpacks her items right away, ready to go on a new adventure. After days of working on her manuscript, Jennifer unwinds by the lake the next day. She hears strange noises but doesn't pay attention to them. The noises, though, continue to bother her. Jennifer goes over to the adjoining shed to investigate, but all she discovers are poison vials. She spills her drink on her clothes by accident and rushes to the kitchen to clean it up. Unknown someone is surreptitiously filming her half-naked inside. She goes for a jog through the woods the next day and comes across an abandoned cabin. Jennifer enters out of curiosity to see what it's like inside. She, on the other hand, finds nothing interesting and goes about her business. When she returns home, she learns that her sink and toilet are clogged, prompting her to contact Matthew, a plumber. He has a mental handicap, which explains his stuttering speech. Jennifer becomes thrilled as he repairs the problem in her bathroom and offers Matthew an unexpected kiss. Matthew blushes for a moment and runs outside as a result. Andy, Stanley, and Johnny hang out in the woods and kill birds for pleasure. Stanley, who has a passion for capturing the bizarre, captures the carnage. Matthew arrives shortly after and informs the group that he received a kiss from Jennifer. Johnny is skeptical, but Stanley assures him that it is true before presenting a video of her in her underpants. Jennifer is bothered by the spooky noises that she hears about the house as night falls. She notices a lifeless bird right outside her door, but she finds nothing else. When she gets back inside, she notices her laptop, which has a group shot of the boys she met a few days before. She stares at it in terror until she realizes they are within. Jennifer is terrified as a result of the taunts from Johnny, Stanley, and Andy. Stanley summons Matthew, who is dragged inside by Johnny so that he can join in their scheme. As the leader, Johnny leads the gang in threatening Jennifer and allowing her to drink. When she refuses, Johnny grows irritated, and she has no choice but to obey his commands. He then pulls Jennifer closer and asks her to show him her teeth. In a seductive manner, Johnny pulls out a gun and presses it into Jennifer's mouth. While Johnny forces Matthew to watch, Andy approaches her and does the same thing, but with liquor. Before pepper spraying Stanley, Jennifer musters the guts to strike Andy's knee. It enables her to flee into the woods and seek refuge. Jennifer runs into the local sheriff, Stork, as well as Earl. Jennifer, in tears, tells the two men about the recent assault she has suffered. Stork reassures her by displaying his badge, assuring her that she is now in good hands. Earl is told to return home by the sheriff, who will take Jennifer back to the cabin. Stork drives Jennifer back to the cabin to confront the gang a few moments later. While searching the cabin for them, he fearlessly shouts them out. Stork discovers a broken bottle of wine and a joint belonging to Jennifer when he investigates the incident. Despite Jennifer's pleadings for aid, he begins questioning her as if she is not a victim. He believes she has no right to make false claims about men he has known since they were children. Stork then commands Jennifer to face the window while patting her on the back. As the boys enter, he touches her inappropriately, revealing Storkus as the group's collaborator. Stork orders Jennifer to get down on her knees while pointing a shotgun at her. Johnny picks her up and tells Matthew to take off his clothes. Jennifer is currently powerless, to say the least. In the presence of 5 ruthless guys, her life is on the line. While Stanley is filming the event, Matthew proceeds to force himself on Jennifer until he is satisfied. Despite her frailty, Jennifer gathers her strength and escapes the cottage. She comes across the group again as she travels deeper into the woods, where she will face even more hardships. Andy brings Jennifer close to a puddle, submerging her head a few times. Stork removes his pants and forces himself on her while she lies on the ground, ignoring her calls for compassion. Jennifer regains consciousness after the men turn on her, and she is now covered in dirt. Jennifer gets up and walks deeper into the woods in the hopes of finding some actual help. She reaches the bridge while the 5 guys continue to follow her, still unhinged by the hell she's gone through. Jennifer lets herself fall into the river, leaving no trace, just as Stork is about to shoot her. The group looks for her, but they are unable to locate her body. Instead, they erase any evidence that is left behind, including Stanley's recordings. Stork arrives home after an eventful day, where he is greeted by his wife and daughter, Chastity. He spends the night at home, as if nothing occurred, with no guilt for his conduct. Stork returns to Earl's shop the next day to return the keys to the cabin, claiming Jennifer had gone without warning. Weeks pass, and the survivors continue about their lives as if nothing occurred. Matthew is the only one of the group that feels guilty and spends much of his time in the woods. He had a vision of Jennifer peering at him in a ghostly manner one day. Matthew closes his eyes in terror, oblivious to the fact that Jennifer is stalking him. Andy and Johnny are out for a drink when they notice Stanley approaching them. He informs the voice, with concern in his voice, that his camera has been taken before revealing that he has kept the contentious video. Johnny erupts in rage and begins berating Stanley for putting them in danger. Johnny hears noises outside his house later that night and goes outside to see a dead bird on the porch. Before returning inside, he kicks it off. He hears it again when he returns inside and emerges with a gun. To his surprise, the dead bird has returned to his porch, with no one to blame. When Johnny hears it for the second time, he rushes outside to see Jennifer's shoe on the porch and tries unsuccessfully to track down the source of the noise. Meanwhile, Stork returns home to find his wife has informed him that a parcel has arrived. He discovers one of Stanley's videos, much to his surprise, and is relieved that neither his wife nor daughter had seen it. Stork rushes off to meet with the gang, who are apprehensive about seeing him. Stork threatens Stanley right away, thinking he's playing a joke on him. Johnny displays the slipper to defend his friend, believing Matthew is to blame for everything. Stork gives Earl a bottle of liquor and shoots him during their hunting excursion. Earl is one of the loose ends in the case, as he witnessed Stork bringing Jennifer back to the cottage. Matthew returns to the cabin, still tormented by his visions, to consider his conduct. He comes inside after hearing Jennifer's voice calling out to him out of nowhere. He eventually trips and falls down the stairs, knocking himself out. As he regains consciousness, he notices Jennifer sitting on the couch in the flesh. Jennifer urges him to sit next to her, and he expresses regret for what he has done to her. As shame overtakes him, Matthew clutches to her, sobbing. Jennifer consoles him and helps him relax, but she later ties a noose around his neck. Despite his gasping for air, Matthew continues to apologize, but Jennifer responds that an apology is insufficient. The resurfacing of pieces of evidence pushes the group to search the woods for Matthew. Andy and Stanley find themselves in an abandoned cabin after hunting for him for several minutes. Andy goes inside while Stanley stays outside looking for any indications of Matthew. There, he is startled to discover Jennifer standing across from him, smirking. When Stanley approaches her, he steps on a bear trap that she has set up and summons Andy, who is struck by a bat. After Jennifer smacks Stanley, both of them lose consciousness. Jennifer ties Stanley to a tree and records him with his camera after a while. She produces a dead mouse and shoves it into his mouth, causing him to vomit. Jennifer then positions the camera and uses fish hooks to keep his eyelids open. Jennifer guts an DNA fish and spreads its insides all over Stanley's face while taping him. The smell of the fish guts draws a swarm of crows, who begin pecking him. His eyeballs are eaten by the birds after a while, and he bleeds to death. Meanwhile, Andy wakes up bound to a few planks above a bathtub inside the rundown cabin. As Jennifer comes to check on him, the water in the tub continues to rise. Andy begs her to let him go, but she is dead set on putting him through the same ordeal she did. Jennifer immerses his head in the water several times before adding lye and removing one of the planks. Andy has no choice but to hold himself up with all of his effort in order to stay afloat, but his body ultimately sinks into the water. Andy's face is finally scorched as a result of this, and he dies as a result. Jennifer pays a visit to Johnny at his local gas station the next day. She seduces him by wearing a short skirt and attacking him as soon as he approaches. She takes him back to the cabin as part of her plan to get her revenge. When Johnny regains consciousness, he discovers himself tethered to the ceiling, naked. Jennifer begins his suffering by pulling out his teeth one by one with pliers, forcing him to recognize his errors. Jennifer pulls out a revolver and slams it into Johnny's mouth, much like he did to her. He does, however, manage to giggle, which agitates Jennifer even more. She slices Johnny's private area with hedge clippers before stuffing it into his mouth. He screams in agony before succumbing to his injuries and bleeding to death. Jennifer has finally reached her final destination, Stork. The sheriff receives a call from his family informing him that Chastity's instructor has arrived at their residence. Jennifer welcomes Stork over the phone, which leaves him speechless. He rushes back home out of concern for his family, only to discover that Chastity had accompanied Jennifer. Stork comes at a deserted playground, his daughter still hidden. Worries overpower him, so he sprints back to the cop car, where Jennifer knocks him out. When he wakes up, he is inside the cabin, with a firearm thrust into his body. Jennifer comments about how lovely Chastity is and how he could stomach abusing a woman, showing no mercy. She slams the rifle down even harder, inflicting unfathomable pain on the sheriff. Jennifer, who is standing across the room, explains that Matthew is awake but unconscious. Matthew's wrist is bound by a thread attached to the trigger, which will kill both men if he moves. Stork begs Jennifer for his life at this moment, but she utterly ignores him. Jennifer walks out of the cabin unfazed by his sobbing, patiently waiting for the situation to turn. When Matthew finally wakes up, he begs Torch to help him relax. Matthew's mental incompetence, on the other hand, drives him to panic and unintentionally pull the trigger, killing them both. Jennifer celebrates with a small smile outside, realizing that she has achieved her vengeance. Jennifer refused to let the men triumph after enduring the most heinous form of torture imaginable. She took matters into her own hands and caused the men the agony she believed they deserved. Throughout the novel, every man was subjected to similar torment to Jennifer. Jennifer, in the end, converted her anguish into strength. Thanks for watching. Like the video and subscribe to the channel to support us.